What's up everyone, it's the Autistic Scyther here, and this is part 2 of my top 10 favorite Ash Ketchum Pokemon list. For those that want to see part 1, it has just been uploaded now, so I suggest you watch that video before coming back to this. Or basically watching this and seeing numbers 5 through 1, then going back to that to see numbers 10 through 6. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get back into this celebration of World Ash Ketchum Day with the remaining 5 of my favorite Pokemon of his that he's ever had. Let's get into it. Moving on next at number 5, we have Sandile. And honestly, for those that are wondering where the Hoenn any of his Hoenn team are, surprisingly enough, there has not been that many Hoenn Pokemon. And honestly, I do like a lot of his Hoenn Pokemon. Corphish is a comedic relief Pokemon out of no other. And Glalie is kind of one of the more surprising Pokemon that he added to his team. More surprising than Gible. Torkoal is kind of interesting due to being his most unusual fire type, especially due to it being, as was his most emotional fire type. And Swallow, Thunder Armor. If you know, you know. But that being said, even with that, Sandile was honestly, by and large, one of the coolest Pokemon he's ever had in the Hoenn anime. Starting from, especially when it was a Trico, as mostly it would stick around with a twig in its mouth, almost like a cool guy, your standard cool guy or delinquent. It basically looked pretty awesome. And naturally, even with that, it added to the edgelord factor as it evolved. And granted, throughout Hoenn, the fact that he had it as a Grovyle for the remainder of Hoenn, and a good amount of his time in the Battle Frontier really does say a lot. And it's one of his most, to the point that, honestly, I thought it was going to stick around as Grovyle for the longest time. So color me surprised when he evolved into Sandile in order to protect a Meganium it had fallen in love with, which eventually broke his heart and kept him from using most of his moves. But yeah, even with that, Sandile basically became one of the coolest Pokemon that I honestly had ever seen. And keep in mind, Sandile is one of my favorite. You'll soon see where he ranks on the grass starters list later on. Keep an eye on that. But yeah, even with that, he is one of the few Pokemon to ever defeat Tobias's Darkrai. And we all know how hard Tobias was to defeat. Yeah, really does say a lot. Moving on next at number 4, we have Lucario. Alright, speaking of Tobias, if there ever was a Pokemon that would have made sense for him to have during Sinnoh, it's Lucario. Yeah, honestly, I hate to be that guy, but Ash should have gotten a Riolu as early as Sinnoh, especially considering the Pokemon Unranger 2-part episodes where he bonded with a Riolu. Seriously, that was a perfect time. Honestly, maybe then he would have won against Tobias and basically defeat and basically won the Sinnoh League. But well, beggars can't be choosers. That being said, it's better late than never that he ended up getting a Riolu in Journeys. And honestly, the fact that this thing was basically started off as a Pokemon who wanted to get stronger and eventually did a lot of training in order to get that far really does say a lot. Especially with a nice little, especially considering how it seemed to have a nice little rivalry with Pikachu, to the point that caused Pikachu to run away. And even with that, I think in part of that was because of they knew Karina's Lucario was coming. And heck, the fact that it basically was inspired by Karina's Lucario to become as strong as it did, and getting a Mega to boot, really does say a lot. However, the true reason I put Lucario at number 4 was its kind of back and forth with Go Cinderace. As basically it was kind of like a Bokeh and Tsukomi routine between the two of them, with Cinderace being the more, well, lackadaisical and happy-go-lucky part of the pair, and Lucario being the more serious member, which honestly fits that so much. Really does. And honestly, it's awesome. That's all I gotta say. Moving on next, at number 3, we have Gengar. Speaking of a Pokemon Ash should have captured earlier, anyone remember when during the original animated series when Ash ended up heading to the Lavender Town Pokemon Tower in order to find a ghost type, and he ended up befriending the original ghostly trio of Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar? To the point that Haunter decided to come along with him? Yeah, I do. And I also remember that Ash should have at least caught and kept Haunter on his team. I mean, that's my opinion. And the fact that Haunter basically defeated Tsareena by making her laugh and then just decide to stick around with her really doesn't make that much sense. Ugh. That being said, you can understand how excited I was when I saw the episode that had Ash finally capture a Gengar of his own. And honestly, keeping in mind, considering how at least one Pokemon in most of his anime ones have had a sort of, dare I say, a difficult past, it really does say a lot that Gengar's was one of the more difficult ones due to being abandoned by his trainer, who did so because he thought it was because he thought he was cursed. You jerk! Okay, rant aside. Honestly, I think Gengar basically flourished the most with Ash than with that trainer. And the fact that he ended up making use of Gengar, especially unlocking the Gigantamax factor with it, yeah, really says a lot. Plus, out of all the Pokemon from the Journeys team, Gengar was honestly one of the most enjoyable Pokemon due to just being a flat-out prankster, which honestly says a lot. And it definitely fits Ash's team as a result. With that being said, I'm surprised Gengar didn't befriend a good amount of his other Pokemon like, well, Corphish. Would have made some sense. Moving on next, at number 2, we have Pikachu. Wait. Don't click off. Don't click off. Let me explain. Yeah, I know a lot of people would say that Pikachu would honestly be number 1, and I'm inclined to agree with them. I mean, it's Ash. I mean, you can't think of Ash without thinking of Pikachu. I mean, that's the bread and butter. That's the bread and butter. That's the bread and butter pairing. Peanut butter and jelly. The ride or die. The original ride or die pair. But honestly, when you think about it, Pikachu is one of the few individuals that's iconic. But even as he's been with Ash throughout his whole journey. And you get to see so much of his personality. Through their ups and downs, their many wins and their many losses, all of which really having a lot to do with battle. I mean, heck, we've seen a lot of they've basically been with each other through a lot of their victories against Brock's Onyx or Lieutenant Surge's Raichu, to like the many of the hard losses, like his loss against Tyson's Meowth, and his initial loss against Norman's Vigoroth. And yeah, even most of those that kind of either confused or infuriated a lot of us fans. Like of course Pikachu losing to Tobias's Snivy, and not Tobias's Snivy, like Pikachu losing to Trip Snivy, or tying with Tobias's Latios, or heck, even the infamous Thunder Armor. Again, if you know, you know. But even with that, we knew at the end of the day, whenever Ash went to a new region, we knew Pikachu would be at his side. However, there's one more of his Pokemon that basically edged way ahead of Ash's Pikachu by the smallest of margins. And moving on next, at number 1, we have Infernape. Yeah, honestly, if you hadn't already guessed, a lot of his Pokemon were part of his Sinnoh. These Pokemon were on his Sinnoh team. And honestly, Infernape's one of his best ones. Especially since at the beginning, when it started off as a Chimchar as part of Paul's team. But as soon as Ash basically decided to take Chimchar in after Paul abandoned it, or released it in this case, basically it basically just turned into the Chimchar show, as it basically did its best to try and prove itself to everyone, and to bring out its true power, even to the point of trying to prove itself to its former trainer. And honestly, we were there that entire time, not only seeing it introduce Hyper Blaze, as most people call it, but even evolving into Monferno during the full 6-on-6 battle against Paul at Lake Acuity, to even evolving into Infernape, and then even its final battle against Paul's Electivire, which finally cemented Paul's respect for the monkey. And it goes even further, to the point that in Journeys, it sparred with Ash's other fire types and even a Moltres. You gotta admit, that's one of the most exciting things ever. And honestly, I wouldn't think of a better Pokemon than Infernape to take the top spot. And that's all of my top 10 favorite Ash Ketchum Pokemon. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.